All came on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday was the day I usually went over the previous week's numbers with my accountant, and I had a spreadsheet open showing that my bakery had cleared $4.2 million in revenue for the year. I was 31 years old, I owned 3 storefronts across the Phoenix metro area, and I had just signed a lease on a 4th location in Scottsdale. When my mother-in-law's name lit up my phone, I almost let it go to voicemail. I should have. "Sweetheart," she said. And that word coming from her always made my shoulders tense up, because she only used it when she wanted something. "We need to have a family dinner this Sunday." "The whole family. It's important." I asked what it was about. She said it wasn't anything to worry about. She just wanted everyone together. Then she hung up before I could ask anything else. I should back up. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I grew up in a small town in Eastern Oregon, the kind of town where everyone knew your business before you did. My parents owned a feed store. We weren't poor exactly, but we weren't comfortable either. I started working when I was 12, sweeping the floors of my dad's store for $2 an hour. By the time I was 16, I was running the register, doing inventory, dealing with vendors. I learned early that money came from somewhere and that somewhere was usually your own 2 hands. I met my husband in college. He was studying business, I was studying culinary arts, and we used to joke that we'd start an empire together. He came from money, not generational wealth or anything like that, but his parents had done well for themselves. His father was a retired orthopedic surgeon. His mother had been a real estate agent who'd made a small fortune flipping houses in the early 2000s. They had a beautiful home in Paradise Valley with a pool and a view of Camelback Mountain, and the first time I had dinner there, I remember thinking I'd never been in a house where you couldn't hear the neighbors. His parents were polite to me from the beginning. Polite. That's the word I'd use. Not warm, not welcoming, just polite in the way that very wealthy people are polite to the help. My mother-in-law would ask about my family, and when I told her about the feed store, she'd nod and say, "How charming," and then change the subject to something about her tennis club. But here's the thing. I worked. I worked harder than anyone I knew. I graduated, I took out a small business loan, I started baking out of a commercial kitchen I rented by the hour at 3 in the morning because that was the only time I could afford it. My husband, bless him, believed in me from day one. He kept his job at a consulting firm during those early years. He paid our rent. He held my hair back when I cried at midnight because I'd ruined a batch of pastry cream worth $200 in ingredients I couldn't afford to replace. My in-laws never invested a dime. Let me be clear about that. They never gave us money. They never co-signed a loan. They never even bought a pastry from my first shop when it opened. My mother-in-law actually told me at the grand opening that she was on a low-carb diet and wouldn't be eating anything. She said it with a smile. But I made it work. The first shop took off because I had a recipe for a brown butter croissant that food bloggers went insane for. The second shop opened 2 years later. By year 5, I had 3 locations and a wholesale account with 2 of the best hotels in Phoenix. By year 7, the year my mother-in-law called me on that Tuesday, I had built something I was proud of. Something that was mine. My husband had left his consulting job 2 years earlier to come work with me. He handled the business side, I handled the creative side. He took a salary, a fair one, but the business was in my name only. We'd talked about it when we got married. He insisted. He said it was my dream, my work, my risk, and he wanted it to stay that way. He'd actually had me sign a postnuptial agreement before we opened the 3rd location, protecting the business from anything that might happen between us. That's the kind of man he is. So on Sunday, I put on a nice dress and we drove out to Paradise Valley. I brought a box of pastries because I always brought a box of pastries, even though I knew most of them would end up in the trash. His brother was there. I'll call him the brother because using his real name still makes my teeth hurt. He was 28. He'd dropped out of 2 colleges. He'd worked at a surf shop in San Diego for a while, then moved back home, then tried to start a podcast about cryptocurrency, then tried to be a personal trainer, then decided he wanted to be a film producer. He'd been living in the pool house at his parents' place for 3 years. He drove a BMW his father had bought him as a college graduation gift, which was funny because he hadn't actually graduated college. His girlfriend was there too. She was 23, a former model, and she had a way of looking at my engagement ring like she was calculating its resale value. Dinner was tense from the start. My mother-in-law had hired a caterer, which was unusual. She usually liked to cook elaborate meals herself so she could fish for compliments. The fact that she'd outsourced meant she was distracted, which meant she was nervous, which meant something was about to happen. It happened over the dessert course. The caterer was clearing the entree plates when my father-in-law cleared his throat and said he wanted to talk about family. "We've been thinking a lot about the future," he said. "About legacy. About what we leave behind." My mother-in-law was nodding along like a bobblehead. "Your mother and I aren't getting any younger, and we started thinking about what kind of family we want to be. About who has and who doesn't. About fairness. I should have left right then." I felt it in my chest, that animal warning, the way you feel when you're driving and you know something bad is about to happen, but you can't quite see it yet. My mother-in-law took over. "Honey," she said, looking at me, and that sweetheart voice was back, "we've been so proud of what you've built. Truly. Your little bakery business has just done so well. Little bakery business has just done so well. Little bakery business, 4.2 million in revenue, 43 employees, a wholesale contract that had just been renewed for another 3 years. And we've been talking, and we feel that since you've been so blessed, and since you're a part of this family now, it's time to think about your brother." I just looked at her. I didn't say anything. I waited. "He's struggling," she went on. "He has so many talents, but he hasn't had the same opportunities, and we feel that as a family, we should help each other, lift each other up." My father-in-law cut in. "We'd like you to make your brother a partner in the business, a real partner." We were thinking 40%. I want you to understand something. I had not eaten a bite of food prepared by these people that I had paid for. I had not received a single dollar from them. I had not asked them for advice, for support, for guidance, for anything. And they were sitting across from me, telling me to give their other son almost half of what I had built with my own hands. 40%. I looked at my husband. His face was the color of skim milk. "And we'd also like you to consider buying him a house," my mother-in-law added, like she was suggesting an after-dinner mint. "He needs his own space. The Encanto neighborhood would be perfect. Something starter level. Maybe in the 800,000 range." I finally found my voice. "You want me to give your son 40% of my company and buy him a house. He's your brother now," my mother-in-law said. "Family." "He's not my brother," I said. The words came out flat. "He's my husband's brother, and I don't owe him anything." The brother spoke up for the first time. "It's not like you can't afford it. Mom showed me your numbers." "What numbers?" "From the tax filing." "Mom got them from your accountant." I felt something cold slide down my spine. My accountant had been a friend of my father-in-law's. I'd switched accountants a year ago, but apparently this person had still been talking. I made a mental note to call my lawyer in the morning. "Honey, calm down," my mother-in-law said, even though I hadn't said anything. "This is what families do. We share, we provide for each other. Your husband is going to inherit half of everything we have one day. It's only fair that his brother gets a piece of what you have. My husband doesn't own any of my business. Well, technically. But we all know that in a marriage, he's not part owner. He works for the company. There's a post-nup." The brother's girlfriend actually laughed. Out loud, like I'd said something funny. My father-in-law's face got very still. "We're trying to do this the nice way." "What's the not nice way?" He looked at my husband. "If your wife isn't willing to be part of this family, then she shouldn't be part of this family, and neither should you. We've already spoken with our attorney about adjusting our estate plan. Your brother will receive everything. The house, the investment accounts, the property in Sedona. Everything." My husband finally spoke. His voice was hoarse. "Dad, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that family means everything to your mother and me, and if your wife wants to be part of this family, she'll do the right thing. If she doesn't, then you both need to think very carefully about your priorities." My mother-in-law jumped in, all sweetness again. "We don't want it to come to that." "Of course we don't. We love you both. We just want everyone to be taken care of. You want me to give my brother 40% of a business I built from nothing, plus an $800,000 house," I said, "or you're going to disinherit your own son and cut us off from the family." Don't make it sound so harsh, she said. How else am I supposed to make it sound? The brother leaned back in his chair. Look, I get that you're emotional, but think about it from my perspective. I have ideas. I have plans. I just need some capital and some legitimacy to get going. If I had a piece of an established business, I could leverage that to build my own thing. I'm not asking you to just give me money, I'm asking for an opportunity. I stared at him. You're asking for 40% of a company you've never set foot in. You've never bought a single pastry from me. You've never asked me a single question about how I run my business. You don't even know what city my third location is in. Tempe, he said, smug. It's in Mesa. The room went quiet. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my voice was not. I looked at my mother-in-law, then my father-in-law, then the brother, then his girlfriend. I want to make sure I understand exactly what you're proposing. You want me to give your other son almost half of my company, which would be worth roughly $1,700,000 based on this year's valuation. You also want me to buy him a house worth $800,000. So you're asking me for approximately $2.5 million in equity and assets transferred to a man I am not related to, in exchange for the privilege of remaining in your family. Did I get that right? My mother-in-law's mouth opened and closed. And if I say no, you're going to disinherit your son, my husband, the one who actually came out of your body. Because I won't give your other son a quarter of my net worth. Dear, you're being dramatic. That word again, I said, and I almost laughed. My husband stood up next to me. We're going home. Sit down, his father snapped. No, my husband said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. I'm not having this conversation. Neither is my wife. Whatever you decide to do with your estate is your business, but you will not threaten my marriage to extort money from my wife. Do you understand me? His mother actually started crying. The kind of crying she did when she didn't get her way at restaurants. After everything we've done for you. What have you done for me? My husband said. Tell me one thing you've done for me in the last 10 years that wasn't transactional. She couldn't answer. We left. I didn't take the pastry box with me. They could throw it in the trash with the rest of my contributions to that family. I cried in the car on the way home, not because I was sad, because I was furious, and I'm one of those people who cries when I'm angry, and I hate that about myself. My husband held my hand at every stoplight. When we got home, I called my lawyer. It was 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. She picked up on the second ring. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, and when I was done, she said, okay. First thing tomorrow morning, here's what we're doing. By Wednesday, I had a new accountant under NDA. I changed the locks on all 3 locations. I'd informed my bank that no one in my husband's family had any authority to inquire about or access any of my accounts. I'd had my lawyer draft a cease and desist letter to my former accountant warning of legal action if he shared any further information about my finances with anyone. I'd put my 43 employees on notice that if anyone from my husband's family showed up at any location asking questions, they were to be politely escorted out and I was to be notified immediately. I'd also done one more thing. I'd had my lawyer draft a letter to my in-laws. The letter was brief. It said that I had no interest in their family arrangements, that I would not be transferring any equity or assets to anyone, and that any further contact from them regarding my business would be considered harassment and treated accordingly. The letter was sent via certified mail. The brother called me Thursday afternoon from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that started civil and ended with him calling me a word I won't repeat. I saved the voicemail. My lawyer added it to a folder she was building. My mother-in-law called my husband 17 times on Friday. He answered the 18th. She was sobbing. She said his father had had a panic attack. She said the brother was threatening to move out of the pool house and live on the streets. She said it was all my fault. My husband listened for about 3 minutes. Then he said, Mom, I love you, but I'm not having this conversation again. If you'd like to have a relationship with us that doesn't revolve around money, we're open to it. If not, please don't call. He hung up. He looked at me. I looked at him. We ordered Thai food and watched a movie about pottery. The next month was strange. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, and when it didn't, I started to relax. Then on a Tuesday morning, almost exactly a month after the dinner, my 4th location's contractor called me. He said someone had shown up at the construction site that morning claiming to be the property owner and demanding to inspect the work. I knew before I asked. Tall, mid-50s, gray hair, drives a Range Rover. Yeah, the contractor said. How'd you know? I called my lawyer. By that afternoon, we had a restraining order in process. My father-in-law had also called the landlord of the new building, claiming to be a partner in my business and requesting copies of the lease. The landlord, thank God, had called me first. That was when I stopped being polite. I had my lawyer file for a formal restraining order against all three of them. We filed it on the basis of harassment, tortious interference with business, and attempted fraud. We attached the voicemail from the brother, the certified letter response, the contractor's statement, the landlord's statement, and a sworn affidavit from my former accountant who'd been visited at his office by my father-in-law demanding records he had no right to. The hearing was 3 weeks later. They didn't think I'd actually go through with it. They showed up to court without lawyers. My mother-in-law wore a pearl necklace and a tasteful navy dress. She'd been crying. She was good at crying. They were prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me, my business locations, my employees, or my home. They were prohibited from contacting any vendor, landlord, contractor, or employee associated with my business. They were prohibited from making any public statement about my business. My mother-in-law fainted, or pretended to. It was hard to tell. In the hallway outside the courtroom, my father-in-law looked at my husband and said, "You're choosing her over us." My husband said, "I chose her 10 years ago." We walked out. The next 6 months, my husband and I had no contact with his family. I won't pretend it didn't hurt him. He grieved in his way. He'd been raised in that house. He'd thought, for a long time, that the cold, transactional way they'd raised him was just how families worked. It took some unpacking. He started seeing a therapist. So did I. I learned in therapy that I'd been ready for that dinner for a long time, that my whole life I'd been training for the moment when someone would try to take what I'd built and demand I be grateful for the taking. My therapist asked me once where that came from, and I told her about being 12 years old, sweeping the floor of my dad's feed store, and a customer once asking my dad if I was being paid. My dad said, "Of course she's being paid. She's working." That customer had looked surprised, like a child working in her father's business should do it for free, out of love. My dad had told me later, in private, never work for free, not for anyone. Love and work are two different things. People who tell you otherwise are trying to steal from you. I'd forgotten that lesson for a few years. I remembered it now. The fourth location opened 9 months after that Sunday dinner. It did better than any of the others. I started getting press attention. There was a feature in a national food magazine. There was talk of a cookbook. A private equity firm reached out about investment and I turned them down, but it was nice to be asked. Around month 7, I started hearing things through the grapevine. My husband's grandmother, who'd never approved of my mother-in-law and had always been kind to me, called me on a Tuesday afternoon. She said my husband's brother had been arrested for DUI. Second offense, he'd been driving the BMW his father had bought him. He was looking at jail time. She said my mother-in-law had cashed in some retirement accounts to pay for his lawyer. She also said my father-in-law had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. Early stage, treatable, but the treatment was going to be aggressive. He'd retired from a small consulting practice he'd been doing on the side. Money was tighter than they wanted to admit. She asked me, very quietly, if I would ever consider speaking to my mother-in-law again. She said my mother-in-law had been asking about us. I told her I'd think about it. I did think about it. For weeks. I talked to my therapist. I talked to my husband. I talked to my own mother, who I'd grown closer to over the past year, who'd told me she was proud of me in a way she'd never said out loud before. In the end, I wrote my mother-in-law a letter. It was 4 sentences long. It said, "I am sorry to hear about your husband's diagnosis. I wish him a full recovery. My husband and I are not interested in resuming any relationship that involves financial demands of any kind. If you can accept that, you may write back." She never wrote back. That's how I knew I'd made the right call. Because if she'd really wanted her son back, if she'd really wanted to know us as people instead of resources, she would have written. A grieving mother who'd come close to losing everything would have written. But what she really wanted was for us to come crawling back and offer to help. And we didn't. Because help offered out of guilt isn't help. It's tribute. The brother eventually pleaded out the DUI, got probation, lost his license for a year. His girlfriend left him about 3 weeks after the arrest. The pool house, I heard, had been quietly listed as a rental on a vacation booking site. My in-laws were trying to bring in income. My father-in-law finished his treatment. He's still alive, as far as I know. We never went back. It's been 4 years now. I'm 35. The bakery is now 5 locations. The cookbook came out last fall. My husband and I had our first child 18 months ago, a daughter, and I have made a decision that I will tell you about now and not apologize for. My daughter will never meet her paternal grandparents. Not because we're cruel, not because we hold grudges, but because I will not raise a child in the presence of people who think love can be invoiced. My own parents fly out 4 times a year. My mom holds my daughter and cries every time. My dad, who is 71 now and still working at the feed store he's been trying to retire from for a decade, taught my daughter to say Papa before she could walk. They are her family. They earned it. I want to say one more thing because I know some of you are going to comment about how I should forgive, how blood is blood, how family is family, how you only get one set of in-laws. I have heard all of it. I have considered all of it. And here is what I have come to. Family is not a fact. Family is a decision. You decide every day who you let into your life, who you protect, who you sacrifice for, who you stand beside. Blood is not loyalty. Shared DNA is not love. The people who love you are the people who show up, who don't keep score, who don't try to take what you've built and call it sharing. I built something from nothing. I worked for it. I sacrificed for it. I cried over it at 3 in the morning when I was 23 years old and didn't know if I was going to make rent. And when the people who hadn't lifted a finger to help me build it decided they were entitled to half of it because of a piece of paper that made me technically related to their other son, I said no. And I have never, not once, in 4 years, regretted saying it. If you are reading this and you are in a similar situation, I want to tell you something. The fear of losing family is sometimes worse than the actual losing. The threat is the weapon. Once they actually do it, once they actually walk away, you find out that the family they were threatening you with was never really yours to lose, because real family doesn't threaten. Real family doesn't extort. Real family doesn't sit across from you over a dessert course and ask you to hand over your life's work for the privilege of being loved. You don't owe anyone what you built. Not your siblings, not your in-laws, not your parents, not anyone. What you built is yours. Protect it. Stand on it. And if someone you love tries to take it from you, let them try. Then let them go. The bakery in Scottsdale is doing very well, by the way. The brown butter croissant sold out by 10 this morning. I baked the first batch myself, at 4 in the morning, like I always do. My daughter was still asleep when I left. My husband kissed me at the door. The sky was just turning pink over Camelback Mountain. It's a good life. I made it myself. And nobody, not anyone, will ever take it from me. I think about that Sunday dinner sometimes, when I'm rolling out croissant dough at 4 in the morning and the bakery is quiet and the sky outside is still black. I think about how every choice in that room had been building for years before any of us realized it. Caroline didn't wake up one morning and decide to ask me for $2.5 million. She had been training herself to believe she deserved it, one small entitlement at a time, for decades. And Theodore had been raised to take, never to build, never to wait, never to earn. The dinner wasn't the event. The dinner was the harvest. They were just collecting what they'd been planting in themselves for years. That's the thing about consequences. They're never random. The shape of someone's life today is the sum of every small decision they made yesterday and the year before and the decade before that. Theodore lost his license because he'd been getting away with reckless behavior since he was 16, and nobody ever made him face the cost. Caroline lost her son because she had spent 30 years treating love like a transaction, and when she finally raised the price too high, the contract broke. None of it was random. None of it was bad luck. It was math. And the same was true for me. I didn't survive that dinner because I was tough or because I was lucky. I survived it because I had spent 20 years before that night learning how to work, how to refuse what wasn't mine to give, how to value my own labor. My father in the feed store taught me that lesson when I was 12, and I had practiced it every day since. When the moment came, I didn't have to find the strength. I had already built it. I want to say this gently because I know some of you are listening from a hard place. You don't have to be born strong. You don't have to be born wise. Both of those things are habits, not gifts. You build them the way I built the bakery, in small, impossible hours, with no one watching, with no one cheering. Character is just the accumulation of choices made when nothing seems to depend on them, until one day everything depends on them, and you find out who you actually are. The other thing I want to say is that being good and being soft are not the same. I refused Caroline that night, and I have not spoken to her in 4 years, and I have raised my daughter without her, and I sleep well. Because mercy that costs you your life isn't mercy. It's surrender wearing a kinder name. Real morality means knowing the difference between forgiveness and self-erasure. Real wisdom means knowing when love is being used as a weapon. Real strength means putting the weapon down anyway and walking out the door. I built something from nothing. I held what I built. And I taught my daughter, before she could speak, that her hands are hers, her work is hers, her life is hers. That is the only inheritance I ever wanted to give her, and it is the only one that ever mattered.